Good afternoon, everybody. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, if you would like to take your seat, we'll try to start on time, which is now. Welcome to this first session of the Subtem 1, which is about global deforestation challenge and opportunity for concrete action to halt forest loss by 2030, and you remember that the operative word or sentence in the Glasgow Declaration during COP26. So this year, 2022, it's 8 years to 2020, so it's even more critical in terms of we need to accelerate and we need to deliver in terms of forestry and in terms of collectively reduce deforestation and degradation. So this event will set the stage for the Subtem 1 of the conference of the World Forestry Congress. And today we will be hearing the perspective from tropical forest countries such as Ghana, Colombia, Ecuador, Indonesia, and some subtropical countries, Argentina or Egypt, and from donor and multilateral organizations. Within the next 90 minutes, and it's a very tight, packed agenda, we will discuss verifiable forest action, the global deforestation trends, current drivers of deforestation and forest degradation, and how to further bring to forefront forest solution, because that's important. I mean, we should stop talking of the problem. We should look at actionable solution. In terms of investment policies, and for such solution to be recognized, rewarded, and enhanced. But to start off, let us welcome Madam Maria Elena Semedo, the FAO Deputy Director General, that will introduce us. Madam Semedo.
Good afternoon to all. Thank you. Excellencies, colleagues, friends, dear participants, distinguished delegates, welcome to this session on global deforestation, challenge and opportunities for concrete action to halt and reverse forest loss by 2030. The first of the Turning the Tide, Reversing Deforestation and Forest Degradation Subteam. Although global deforestation has slowed in recent years, the latest Global Forest Resource Assessment shows that deforestation continues at an alarming rate of 10 million hectares per year. And the Assessment Global Remote Sensing Survey reveals that the impact of agricultural expansion on forests is greater than previous thought, driving almost 90% of global deforestation. This figure stresses the critical need for cross-sectoral efforts. Increasing agri-food productivity to meet the demands of a growing population and halting deforestation are not mutually exclusive. We can reach both. For true sustainable transformation of our agri-food system, it is essential to recognize the role of forests in support of agriculture and promote agricultural practices compatible with forest conservation. Increased political will and financial and technical support can make this a reality. Ladies and gentlemen, the latest IPCC report highlights the important role of halting deforestation to address the climate crisis. As the Deputy Secretary General reminded us at the recent United Nations Environment Assembly, drastically reducing deforestation and systematically restoring forests and other ecosystems is the single largest nature-based opportunity for climate mitigation. Forest-based solutions are also key to address today's health, biodiversity, food security, and inequality crisis. calls for action are loud and clear from the United Nations Secretary General, turning the tide of deforestation at the 2019 United Nations Climate Summit, to the COP26 Glasgow Climate Pact, and the Glasgow Leaders Declaration on Forest and Land Use. 2022 is a critical year to accelerate and scale up delivery on our commitments and to collectively reduce deforestation and forest degradation. Now, it is the time to put our pledges into action. Tropical forested countries, which have been working on their REDD+ processes for over 10 years, demonstrated that reducing deforestation and related emission is achievable. Changing structural drivers of deforestation is as much an issue of speed and scales as it is of determination. Much still remains to be done. While there is no magic formula, solutions exist, and we know them. Improve landscape planning, governance, secure tenure, and sustainably intensify agri-food system, just to name a few. We must engage all stakeholders, and I think throughout the different events we had today, it has been said that no one has the solution, but together we can have the solution. From government, local communities, women and indigenous people, to smallholders, the private sector, science and academia. And public and private finance need to be drastically scaled up. Colleagues, friends, dear participants, the countries and organizations here today will provide valuable insights into the roadmap to scale up efforts. We are honored by their presence and look forward to the exchange. FAO, with UN-REDD and other key initiatives and partners, is fully committed to support member countries to achieve concrete, deep, and systemic change by addressing the underlying drivers of deforestation while advancing sustainable development goals. It is time to pass from an era of negotiations, commitment, and pledges to an era of ambitious action at scale, a decade of achievements in reducing deforestation and actively restore land and ecosystem. It is a unique chance for us today and for the future. Thank you again, and looking forward to our discussion.
Thank you, Madame Sevedo. Can we have the slide? I have them there, but yeah. I'm going to give you a brief introduction overview on the issue of forests as a nature-based solution. And human, we have a tendency to believe that we are somewhat special. This is something that is maintained in most of our culture, religion, or constitution. And in a sense, we are, humans are the only super predator. There is no species that we cannot kill, and being a mere fraction of the living biomass, we have altered, overused 70% of our world to the point that we have created a special geological era, the Anthropocene. And the Anthropocene, our influence on planetary system has become global for the first time in human history. And because of the action during the last 100 years, several planetary-wide processes appear close to reach their tipping points. And then you see that We have overshoot the now 5 of the planetary boundaries. We are continue emitting more and more greenhouse gases. We have several dozen of millions of people expected to push back into extreme poverty because of the pandemic and so on. And then we have reached the point where we are triggering planetary size tipping points. And for the forest, the dying of the Amazon, that is unfortunately forecasted for eventually the last 20 years, and its transformation in a savanna is one of these planetary tipping points. And the problem is that it's not the only one. I mean, it's sort of, you have a set of these planetary tipping points that are on the verge of being triggered. And what is problematic is that they are not independent. So the melting of the Arctic can provoke a speeding or slowing of the Atlantic current, and that can create a dry condition in the Amazon, and the Amazon transform into a savanna, and then there is a feedback in terms of rainfall. So we are facing titanic change, and the problem is we don't really matter in force of this titanic change. I mean, it's sort of, we have to realize that the issue is not about saving Earth, it's about saving ourselves. And if we want to save ourselves, and if we want to survive the 6 mass extinction that we have created, we need effectively to do something. And if we want to beat the odds and survive a little bit more than the average civilization in history, which you can see is about 340 years, and if you think our civilization started during the industrial era in 18-something, we are close to the expiration date of our civilization. So if we want to save our civilization, if we want to continue to have a decent living and improve the condition of living, we need to take matters into our hands. And the problem is that society collapses because climate change, environment is degraded, natural resources are depleted, inequality increases, the society becomes too complex, is hit by external shock, and then you have the bad luck. You end up with a meteorite on your head or something. And to fight this, or to avoid this planetary tipping point, we need to go to another concept, which is a social tipping points. And the social tipping points are based on the same concept of a rapid, brutal change that is triggered by the evolution of a socio variable. And the tipping point is that magic moment where an idea, a trend, or social behavior cross the threshold and spread like a wildfire. And possible social tipping points are like removing fossil fuels and other perverse subsidies, building carbon-neutral cities, divesting from assets linked to fossil fuel, strengthening climate education and engagement. And in our matters, halting deforestation and degradation and restoring degraded land is definitely a big social tipping point. At the COP26, the global leader committed to work collectively to halt and reverse forest loss and land degradation by 2030, while delivering sustainable development and promoting an inclusive rural transformation. So that's the global declaration. But here, at the 15th World Forestry Congress, it is time again to reinforce the message of the importance of forest entry. So why forest entries matter? And why forests are critical nature-based solutions for more than the climate emergency. Assuming that the world pursues the achievement of the net zero by 2050, we need about 230 gigaton of CO2 equivalent in emission reduction and removal over 2030 to reach the value in 2030 that will give us a net zero by 2050. Assuming that we fully implement the forest element of the Glasgow Declaration, that will contribute of about 10% of this global goal. And that means that 90% of the rest is left to the other sectors: energy, fossil fuel, cement, agriculture, food, waste. But 10% is not negligible already. But what I would like to insist on is that there are plenty of reasons why we need to protect, conserve, restore forests beyond their greenhouse gases emission reduction potential. And first and foremost, maybe, as we have seen before, is the risk of tripping some planetary tipping point. But forests are also the most biodiverse terrestrial ecosystem and valuable in mitigation of biodiversity loss. Forests provide a huge potential in terms of climate change. Forest landscape restoration offers a huge potential in terms of both economic and environmental benefits. Forests are one of the best tools in terms of ecosystem-based adaptation, regulating hydrological services, providing watershed regulation, offering coastal protection, mitigating climate extremes. Forests and trees are also important for the bioeconomy. If we want to move from fossil fuel to a bio-based economy, and if we want to replace concrete or cement by wood, we need wood. And the only thing that produces wood is a tree. There is nothing else that produces wood. So, and you can see the potential of replacing 1 ton of wood is the equivalent of replacing 2.2 tons of CO2 when you use wood instead of cement. And forests create jobs and wealth also. They are very important for the economy. They are important for food security. Forests are covering the 4 dimensions of food security: food availability, access to food, food utilization, stability over time. And forests sustain agriculture via the provision of ecosystem services, pollination, pest control, water regulation, climate regulation. Forest is good for your well-being, to the point that the Japanese are inventing a term, Shinrin-yoku, which is a Japanese bath. On the other side, if you degrade forest, then you may have some pandemics and some emerging diseases. So I hope that I have convinced you that it's now time to act, and we cannot simply stop, discuss, negotiate, look at what the other is doing. We need to have some collective action in terms of going beyond commitment into actionable solution in terms of reduction of deforestation, land degradation, and compensating biodiversity loss. Thank you very much for this quick introduction. Now, what we're all here to is our panelists, and I will introduce our first panel. This first panel will be about how countries are realizing forest solution, and we will look at countries that have addressed deforestation coming from agricultural commodity and how they are forged the path to deforestation-free agriculture. So I'm pleased to introduce and call Excellency Bianca Dagger, who is the Vice Minister of Environment for Ecuador. Bianca, please. Then the Honorable Adriana Lucha Santamendez from Colombia. She's the Director of Forest, Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services in the Ministry of Environment. Welcome Honorable Thomas Yaogambra Akwoba, Manager, Program MRV and Climate Change Directorate, the Forestry Commission in Ghana. And last and not least, I would like to invite Mr. Gustavo Sanchez Valle, the President of the Board, Director of the Red MOCAF in Mexico, to represent the indigenous people and local community. So, we have a very good panel here, and let me start first by Excellency Bianca. Ecuador's efforts to achieve a sustainable production model decoupled from deforestation are a beacon for other nations and stakeholders. That proves that economic growth and environmental conservation can be a mutually supportive and harmonizing process. Bianca, how did you do that in Ecuador? Can you tell us? How do you bring together various sectors and efforts under one collective vision?
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me and having us, the Ecuadorian government, in this panel. Thank you so much, the FAO also for organizing, and the government of Korea as well for hosting us. So thank you so much for the question, and I'll try to summarize it in what the efforts of Ecuador has been together with the Ministry of Environment, Water, and Economic Transition. So the first thing is to have, a vision, and that's something that with our administration we added ecological transition in our mission, and ecological transition, it's an economic transition as well. So one of our main goals, it was also to be, a cross-cutting impact in the economy of Ecuador, and now we are part of the production committee, the National Production Committee, and normally the Ministry of Environment are not in these areas. So that's a huge impact that we're having. The second one is Ecuador is recognized for being a REDD+ pioneer. We were one of the first countries to submit, and one of the first countries to implement a project. So far, we have been working with the GEF, with the GCF, and with the governments of Norway and Germany in two main projects, Pro-Amazonia and REDD+ Early Movers. And after years of working together, not only in the Amazon region, but also in the mangroves and the dry woods, forests of Ecuador, we have come a very long way. And something that we really take into account, you cannot have the approach of conservating the forests only. In countries as Ecuador, you have to take into consideration that the most successful way is to understand that forest is also a social dimension, an economic dimension, and a cultural dimension, especially who are taking care of our forests. So embracing that means to have a higher conception and to reach better results. So I'm very honored to announce that we are now about to launch our next public policy, which is a national certification of deforestation-free products, and actually they are chains. And that has been, the result of working and having the information and be working together with the people that understand which are the drivers of deforestation in our forests, understanding what are the crops that really are putting pressure in our forests. And we have been working with traceability of palm oil, cocoa, coffee, and cattle. And but along with the national certification, we have pilot exports. So we have export 2 containers, one of cocoa for Belgium and one of coffee to Italy. And we're looking for a long-term commercial relationship with Italy with deforestation-free products. So this means definitely a huge impact in the local communities as well. But also, that's also something that we need to work together globally. This is a really challenging for countries as Ecuador, and we cannot do it by ourselves. This is the time where, trade between different countries definitely are opportunities to settle the kind of products that we do have in the shelves around the world. So I respectfully will ask for the whole world, for the northern countries to embrace this, and we really need financial support. If not, then we will only make the gaps bigger between small producers and large-scale producers of this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Moving to another Latin America country, Colombia. Adriana, Colombia is known to be very engaged in halting deforestation, and you recently received result-based payment from the GCF for its progress. So, could you explain which combination of public policy, instrument, and partnership with private sector you have designed and implemented, and maybe share as an example what are some of the key factors how you successfully transform your agricultural systems?
Bueno, primero que todo un saludo y un agradecimiento al gobierno de Corea, a la FAO y al Servicio.
First of all, I would like to take this opportunity to FAO as well as the Korean government. Thank you very much for successfully organizing the 15th World Forest Congress. As for the forest policy of the Colombian government, this is a direction that we've been taking so far. First of all, Colombia has the second largest biodiversity in the world, and by 2030, we will be able to reduce 51% of greenhouse gas emissions. And to that end, we're going to be working very closely with local communities as well as the international community. We have a goal to reduce deforestation to zero. That is the target that we have, and we want to achieve by 2030. First of all, we're trying to modernize our public policies in regard to forestation. About 1 million hectares of land will be covered by the climate action law. So we have legislated that law. And by 2030, we're going to be pursuing the law. And we have also introduced environmental taxes. So taxing people to pay for the services. And at the same time, we also want to be able to promote sustainable environmental governance. Until 2022, by the end of this year, about 18 million trees are going to be planted continuously. And the production value chain will be scaled up across the country. So these are some of the activities under our plan for now. And also cacao and coffee and milk, as well as meat. There are 5 different areas where we have reached agreements on. And we will be signing what we call carbon neutrality pact for these 5 different categories. So that we can continue to pursue sustainable production. And at the same time, improve economic efficiency across the board. We want to achieve the economies of scale to make our economy more sustainable. We are a forest country, you can say, because 53% of our land is forest. And on top of that, About 53% of the land is actually occupied by Aborigines. So they are continuing to become a very important member of the community in terms of production and providing services from forestry. So it is very important to take care of the forest and to have a sustainable use of forest services. We want to make sure that local communities can continue to engage in continuous and sustainable production. And about 44% of the Amazon area in Colombia and we can say that we're continuing to use and provide ecosystem services from Amazon. And in the case of Amazon area in Colombia, deforestation has already been reduced.
Cocoa in the world, Ghana. And we all like our chocolate, and we like our chocolate even better if it's deforestation-free and if it brings equitable income to the people that are producing it. Thomas, Ghana has been promoting green climate-smart cocoa agriculture to enhance local livelihood while contributing to national climate mitigation target. Can you share your experience, how you did it, what you are doing?
Thank you very much, Robert, and thanks to everyone here. Thanks to FAO for this invitation. First, I would like to say this. I am a son to a cocoa farmer, and my father's father, too, was a cocoa farmer, and my education has largely been supported through cocoa farming. So it tells you that cocoa farming is mainly a family thing. It goes beyond just normal business. It's a family thing. And I have friends who are similar in this instance. But beyond that, cocoa farming gives the Ghanaian economy about $1.2 billion annually. And it tells you the extent of effect that cocoa farming has in Ghana. But we've realized one thing and one thing only, that cocoa farming is leading to deforestation and forest degradation, and we needed to change this whole history since it was introduced into the country over 100 years ago. So what we did basically can be summed up in 6 ways. The first one is institutional coordination and arrangement. We have 2 key institutions in Ghana. That's one is the Forestry Commission, where I work. The other one is the Ghana Cocoa Board. Hitherto, you will never see these 2 institutions sitting together around the same table. So we realized that we needed to come together so that we can work towards this goal of removing deforestation from the cocoa value chain. Now we have lots of institutions also along the cocoa value chain. Now we have all of these institutions coming around the Forestry Commission and the Ghana Cocoa Board to remove deforestation from the value chain. We have now coordination both at the national and the sub-national levels. So when you go to the sub-national levels, for instance, we have licensed buying companies, cocoa buying companies, we have big brands teaming up with the Forestry Commission and the Ghana Cocoa Board. So that's the very first one, that's institutional coordination. To be able to have this change, institutions need to come together and work towards that one goal. The second one is about community governance structures. You need to put the communities together. The communities have 100 years of history planting cocoa. So they have that knowledge. How do we harness that knowledge so that we remove deforestation from that value chain? That's the second thing that we've done as a country. Bringing the communities together, putting in place governance structures within the communities, and identifying what we call hotspot intervention areas. That's areas with high deforestation rates. And these are areas that have high cocoa production, high population. So that's the second thing that we have done. The third that I would want to add is implementation of what we call climate smart cocoa practices. Incorporation of trees into cocoa farms, you realize that people would clear the whole of forest and decide to plant trees. And we are now incorporating trees on farms. We have introduced what we call hand pollination methods, so that within a very small area, people are now harvesting more cocoa than before. The fourth one is what I call financing the transitions. You know, this is a practice that has been ensured for a long time, and you want people to move from that practice to what we are calling sustainable practice. It takes some time, it takes financing. And how do we go about this? One, we are providing additional and alternative livelihoods for the people, the cocoa farmers. We've developed what we call rural service centers, where we bring the youth together to train them on giving agricultural services to farmers who are relatively old. So they help them with pruning, they help them with the hand pollination that I talked about. So it will remove the youth from going to illegal logging and all sorts of things. It will bring income to the youth. That's the fourth thing that we've done. In all of this, one key thing that we've realized is policy reforms. You can't use the same policies that we were having previously to enforce change. So we've changed our forest and wildlife policy from one that was quite consumptive based to non-consumptive based, and combining the two. We've realized we need to change our tree tenure system, and because we are encouraging farmers to now plant trees. So ownership of tree, especially naturally occurring tree, is key here for us. The sixth thing that we've done, and which we are doing, is rehabilitation of degraded forest reserves. We are using an approach called the modified tonja system, where a forest reserve communities plant food crops. And once they plant the food crops, they plant the trees as well. The food crops belong to them. In that, they become very much engaged. I heard our deputy minister talking about the social, the economic, and the environment. So that's the social aspect of it. They are protecting the environment, and they are planting the trees in these degraded forests. So these are the 6 key things that we are doing in Ghana. One benefit that I would like to mention, when you go around and you are talking about change in anything, the farmer would ask, would it lead to increase in yield? And that's what we've realized over the period, what this practice is. So for instance, we are recording now from 450 kg per hectare yield to around 600 kg per hectare yield. And these are things that the farmers are looking for, and these practices are leading to them. The other one is such that we have this cocoa forest program that we have in our NDCs. When you look at Ghana's NDCs, for instance, so it's responding to the local need, and it's responding to a global need as well, so that we can keep to the 1.5 degree. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Thomas. Now, an old friend of this indigenous people and local community group told me once, sort of, if you are not sitting at the table, you very quickly end up in the menu. So now we'll have Gustavo, and the full and effective participation of indigenous people and local community is critical if we want to achieve what was decided during the Paris Agreement, and was largely recognized in Glasgow, the role of local community and indigenous people. Can you indicate what are the main challenges to be concretely implemented to go beyond word, and which could be the 3-4 solutions that you think should be promoted? And I think you have slides, Gustavo. Can we have the slides, please?
Sí, gracias. Quisiera comentar que voy a compartir los puntos de vista tanto de organizaciones de base como...
First of all, I would like to share with you various perspectives of different organizations here. So I work at this organization in Mexico, and I'll be speaking on behalf of that organization, and at the same time, I want to take a moment to share with you some of the views that are expressed by the IPLC. I'd like to take this moment to thank FAO as well as the Korean government for giving me this opportunity to speak today. For a very long time, we've been suffering from the pandemic, and we've come to hold the Forestry Congress today, and this is very meaningful indeed. So here, the topic of my presentation is IPLC. And I want to underscore the importance of the indigenous and the local community once again in our efforts. While we are having a discourse and discussion on this topic, it is high time that we take action. Again, I want to take a chance to look at the barriers that are impeding the full and effective participation of IPLC. Now, according to the presentation here, there's the ILO Convention 169. This is the convention that is related to the indigenous communities. However, there are countries that have still not signed the ILO Convention 169. Then there could be areas in which the rights of the indigenous people cannot be fully acknowledged. And of course, there could be issues in terms of consultation, also in terms of making the fair payment, and indigenous people may not be target of the consultation or negotiation process. They may not be fully engaged. And in order to have effective consultation and negotiation, we need to have financial resources. But countries that have not signed on to the convention could rightfully say that they don't have the budget or the money to proceed with such process. And when, for example, governments are trying to carry out the consultation process, because they're not part of the convention, they may not necessarily feel the need or rationale to engage the indigenous people. And they may not be fully recognize the rights and the ownership of the indigenous people in terms of land and territory. So I have a few suggestions to make to ensure full and effective participation of IPLC. I want to go back to the Cancun safeguards, which were discussed at the COP16 at UNFCCC to have a minimum floor in legal matters of participation. First of all, countries really need to recognize the importance of ILO Convention 169. So we need to raise the visibility of the convention. And also, we should implement intensive capacity building processes on PPE, both in governments and IPLC, including the design of spaces for participation, dialogue, and co-creation of policies initiatives. And we need to develop tools for the design of budgets for participation and consultation processes. And we need to adopt the LC identification and self-identification criteria that community organizations in Latin America have built in dialogue with organizations in Asia. So again, I want to emphasize the importance of adopting such criteria that was developed related to local community identification. So it is really important to proceed with this process.
And we reached the end of this panel, almost in time, so thank you very much all. We will now have, while we transit to the next panel, a video that will show you how an individual sparked a movement in a community to put an end on unsustainable farming practice. So if I may ask, and if you launch the video.
Xin chào, tôi là John Bên Giá. Tôi muốn góp một phần nhỏ bé trong việc thay đổi cái phương thức canh tác không bền vững cho bà con tại quê hương của mình. Quê hương tôi được biết đến với con lươn thành huyền thoại, làm nên hồ lắc và núi Chi Dương Chin hùng vĩ, với cánh đồng rộng mênh mông được mệnh danh là vựa lúa của tỉnh Đắk Lắk.
Tuy nhiên, những năm vừa qua với sự khai thác cạn kiệt, tận thu thiên nhiên đã nổi giận. Hàng năm thường xảy ra xói mòn, lũ lụt, mất mùa. Anh John mong muốn tạo nên sự thay đổi cho đời sống dân làng tốt đẹp hơn. Anh trăn trở suy nghĩ cách để thuyết phục được bà con. Anh tìm tới trưởng bản, người có uy tín trong buôn để nhờ sự giúp đỡ. Qua nhiều lần gặp gỡ và trao đổi, cùng nhau làm vườn, làm rẫy, trưởng bản đã dần thấu hiểu những tâm tư và nguyện vọng của anh và đồng ý sẽ cùng anh vận động bà con trong làng.
Cái vấn đề sản xuất bền vững thì nó mang lại hiệu quả hơn. Cho nên là tôi đã quyết định cùng anh John vận động bà con nhân dân rồi để bảo vệ môi trường vừa là tăng năng suất.
Bà con cũng dần nhận ra những thiện ý của anh John và cũng bắt đầu thực hiện thay đổi phương thức canh tác, không còn đốt nương làm rẫy lấn vào rừng tự nhiên. Ngoài ra, bà con cũng học cách chọn giống cây trồng luân canh phù hợp với điều kiện tại địa phương để có được mùa màng bội thu, cho rừng xanh và chim thú có cơ hội sinh tồn và sinh sôi nảy nở.
Thay vì sử dụng thuốc diệt cỏ, nay bà con nông dân đã sử dụng máy phát cỏ vừa nhanh hiệu quả lại không ảnh hưởng tới môi trường.
So you can see that if there is a will, there is a possibility to do something. We are now going to move into our second panel, which is about, we had the first one was what the people on the ground were doing, and the second one is about rewarding this forest solution and how can we mobilize 5 billion in 2025 and close the funding gaps. And here I just want us, while our ladies, to pause for a second. In 2021, we beat one record. That's the first year in human history that we spent $2 trillion in military expenditure. So we are able to spend $2 trillion a year in military expenditure, and we have difficulties to find 5 billion to reward forest solution. So we need to put our priority right, people, because otherwise we are going to problems. So our second panel, let me first introduce Ms. Karin Edsberg, which is a senior advisor from the Ministry of Climate and Environment, Norway. Karin, please. From the Green Climate Fund, we have Benjamin Singer, senior forest and land use specialist. Benjamin. We'll have Martin Monaco, but he will be online. He's the National Director of Forestry in the Ministry of Environment and Sustainable Development. We would like to welcome Her Excellency Gandhi Sulistianto, Ambassador, Bapak, silakan. And finally, Dr. Ali Abosena, the CEO of the Egyptian Environmental Affairs Agency of the Arabic Republic of Egypt. Dr. Abosena. So, we have all our panelists. We have Martin online. Let's start by Norway, a big player, if any, in the whole issue of climate change. Karin, the Paris Agreement cannot be met without forest, of course. And last year we had 141 leaders that signed, endorsed the Glasgow Declaration. But this Glasgow Declaration is a non-binding pledge so far. So can you tell us what are the concrete actions that need to be taken by the signatories to make moving from an area of negotiation to an area of massively scaled up implementation? And how can government catalyst to incentivize private capital flow and accelerate reducing deforestation impact in emerging economies? Easy question.
Thank you. Is the microphone on? Yes. Thank you so much for inviting me, and it's an incredibly important discussion that we're having. It's been made very clear by previous speakers how serious the situation is with continued tropical deforestation, as shown by the Global Forest Watch last week, and also how crucial it is to be able to meet the climate goals of the Paris Agreement. And we know that there is a huge gap between the needed and the actual investments in transformation in the forest and land sector. So the Glasgow Declaration is an important milestone with 142 countries signing up. That includes countries from the north, from the south, and you could say that following up the Glasgow Declaration has three main actors: the forest countries, the supporting countries such as Norway, and the private sector. And we need to see these three elements together, both the public development finance, the private sector finance, and the government's role in driving a long-term transition to zero deforestation and enhanced removals. So firstly, on the public and development finance, such as that which is provided by Norway and other countries in the north, need to continue to support capacities for better forest and land use management, for increased transparency, better forest monitoring, and investing in transformational change, and thus build a platform to be able to go further at a global level as well. And these elements are essential also for the policies on the ground that need to happen in forest countries, which we have heard some great examples of in the previous panel. And they're also essential for results-based finance, which can incentivize further action. Secondly, the potential of private sector finance must be put to use, but in the right way. And we see now a paradigm shift happening in the private sector. Increasing numbers of companies are setting science-based climate targets to reduce emissions, not just their own emissions, but emissions in the value chains and also beyond their value chains. And done right, the ambition of the private sector can scale up finance for forests is our conviction. So the biggest initiative recently is the LEAF Coalition, which is a buyer coalition where Norway participates with a number of large companies as well as other countries. And the LEAF Coalition mobilized $1 billion to reduce deforestation in the 2022 to 26 period. This is the largest public-private effort ever assembled to end tropical deforestation. And this finance will be flowing through the purchasing of high-integrity carbon credits, verified and issued through the Art3 standard. And there was large interest in the first call of proposals last year, with over 30 proposals, and the first 5 letters of intent were signed in Glasgow. A new proposal, a new call for proposals has been announced. It will open on the 9th of May and be open until the 15th of September. And we believe it gives an important long-term signal for private sector finance and for forest jurisdictions. A few words about the Art3 standards, which is what ensures the integrity of the emission reductions and removals that will be generated under the LEAF Coalition. This standard drives climate ambition in supplier forest countries through building on successive periods of increased efforts to reduce deforestation. It also has requirements for buyers. They have to have science-based targets and follow through on implementation. So it's not a matter of getting off without making an effort on your own. The purchase of leaf tons is in addition to the science-based emission reduction targets that the companies have. Thirdly, the government's role. The governments play a crucial role through the policies and measures at the national level. This is where the action has to happen. And even with substantial scaling up carbon financing, it will not compensate for the investments investments that we now see in deforestation. And governments are who can do and implement policy changes. That is necessary to address the drivers of deforestation, such as agriculture expansion, illegal activities, mining, to mention a few. And investments in increased productivity, the right in tax incentives, and the rule of law is what can be done by governments. And I think Ecuador, Ghana, and Colombia just explained great examples of doing just that. It requires ownership in ministries of finance and planning departments, as well as the ministries of forest and climate. So despite the somber news from the IPCC, the Global Forest Watch, and others, we think we might be on the brink of really catalyzing forest finance at scale through this interplay between the public finance, development, multilateral finance, private sector, and the government ownership. Thank you.
Thank you. We all know that finance is essential to achieve the Paris Agreement. We know, however, that there is still a financing gap, and then there is also this issue of green versus grey finance. And as a reminder, I mean, I'm not exactly sure if it's 11 million or 17 million, but we are somewhat subsidizing the fossil fuel industry at the rate of 11 million or 17 million dollars a minute, every minute. So, Benjamin, you work for one of the largest institutions in terms of financing green for the climate change. How can we scale up green finance and reduce grey, and how can the GCF help?
Thank you very much, Robert. It's a very good question, and we keep hearing about this large gap in finance. We heard this morning that there's between 2010 and 2017, $20 billion had been unlocked in green finance for forests, and that might seem impressive until you remember that actually during that same period, almost 40 times that amount went into so-called grey finance. So finance mainly for the drivers of deforestation. Now, we know full well that public finance won't be able to close that gap alone. And Karina pointed this out very eloquently. So we basically have two options. Either we take a chunk of this grey finance and steer it towards the green. Okay, so that's what we do with efforts on addressing deforestation-free commodities. And so the GCF is developing its portfolio in that direction. We're addressing that as a key priority. The other option is simply to crowd in new private finance to tilt the balance in favor of green finance. And it's the second one that I wanted to focus on today. In particular, because we have two major opportunities that have emerged in the past few years. The first one is voluntary carbon markets. Last year, we saw a very rapid growth. They reached $1 billion worth for the first time in November last year. And estimates are putting the growth at around 100 times between 2021 and 2050. So there's a lot of potential there. There's a lot of very promising potential. And in fact, REDD+ has so far secured the lion's share of this growth. REDD+ carbon credits grew 280% last year alone. And then at the same time, there have been very fast developments with Article 6 of the Paris Agreement, which opens a door for carbon markets, compliance of carbon markets at international level. We know that at COP26, for example, there were much further developments in terms of detailing Articles 2.6 and 6.2 and 6.4 in particular. And so both the voluntary and these compliance markets represent tremendous opportunities for unlocking private finance. So what is the GCF doing about that? So the GCF has been specifically designed to use scarce public finance to unlock private finance at scale. We have a high risk appetite. We're not scared to de-risk projects in frontier markets, in challenging ecosystems, and we have a variety of financial instruments for that, not only grants, but also loans, equity, and guarantees. And so currently we're systematically exploring the potential in each project to access finance from carbon markets, whether they be compliant or voluntary. And this is where the GCF's REDD+ strategy comes in. Our REDD+ strategy is a building block, is conducive to this strategy of unlocking private finance at scale. We're looking at, we've been financing REDD+ at 3 levels, through its 3 phases. Phase 1, in terms of readiness, we've already unlocked $12 million, mainly through our dedicated readiness window to support countries in achieving REDD+ readiness by UNFCCC standards, so using the Warsaw Framework. But we're also helping countries go that step further, because voluntary carbon markets in particular are very demanding. They're not so much interested at UNFCCC standards. They want carbon credits that go to the greater level, to the higher level, for example, the archery standard, which we've already heard about. And this is much more ambitious. So we're helping these countries go that extra step in terms of readiness. In terms of phase 2, REDD+ implementation, that's very much the bread and butter of the GCF's work. In forests and land use, we finance emissions reductions in deforestation, coming from deforestation and forest degradation. So that's what we do, and at the same time, many of these projects have the capacity to generate high-quality carbon credits, which can then be traded in voluntary or compliance markets. And then we've been financing phase 3 of REDD+ results-based payments through our pilot program. And what's been interesting is that we've seen it in a number of countries, and Ecuador was one good example that we heard about. Costa Rica is another. The countries that have been receiving these results-based payments are reallocating, reinvesting them, and using them as a stepping stone, in many cases, to actually unlock private finance through carbon markets. And Costa Rica is an example at hand where they have reinvested the proceeds from the results-based payments from the GCF into a mechanism to help landowners, many of which are indigenous communities, landowners transfer the rights to carbon revenues to the government so that the government can pool them together. And this is a necessary step to accessing, for example, financing from the LEAF coalition using the archery standard. Thank you very much.
Merci, Benjamin. I think we will continue in this vein. Martin, who is online, yes. You hear us? Can you speak so we can see we hear you?
Sí, ¿qué tal? Buenas tardes.
Okay. Martin, countries receiving result-based payment will be particularly interested in learning how Argentina is making the important connection from the nation to the local beneficiary. And could you share with us how the RBP fund linked to the national funds or the forest law and the important benefit sharing mechanism we developed and agreed with the province? The floor is yours.
¿Qué tal? Buenas tardes a todos y a todas.
First of all, I'd like to thank the organizer for the invitation. In our country, Argentina, we have begun from 2007 the effort to legislate the Forest Protection Act. So the law has been in place since 2007. Especially, this is a law that is very much closely related to the livestock industry. I said that the law was legislated back in 2007. The Forest Act is related to the conservation and restoration of forest. And it is also closely linked to the management or the governance, and also related to the national fund, and equally related to the compensation structure. So there's also close relations between the forest services and the forest managers and owners. We have calculated the cost that it takes to conserve the forests. And for about 300 million hectares, we have come up with the cost of conservation of the forest. And about 19% of our national land, which is forest, that area has been set aside for the compensation structure. And Argentina is not only pursuing the results-based payment system, but also at the same time, we're making effort to legislate relevant laws such as Forest Act. And starting from 2018, the federal government is working to strengthen a network which considers various technical aspects, which is connected to the UN Red Plus, the third edition of the report. So the project related to UN Red Plus is underway actively. This is also being carried out in partnership with FAO. As I mentioned before, we have established the Forest Act, which is used as a basis for the implementation of the Red Plus project, which is tapping into the fund worth about $82 million. We're doing this because of the important contribution that it can make to mitigating climate change impact. Also, our country, Argentina, in terms of forest development or recognizing the value of forest, we are trying to manage the forest in a way that will contribute to sustainable development of the country. And we're trying to transform forestry related industry into added value industry. That is one of the approaches that we're taking to forest management. And we are also developing forestry from the point of community engagement. We're very much focused on coming up with a comprehensive and broad-based forest management scheme or structure. And we also believe in the importance of prevention in relation to deforestation. And such preventive efforts are being undertaken at a national level. There are also various monitoring programs in place to better manage our forest. And also at a federal government level of Argentina, we're also going all out to strengthen our institutional aspects. And again, we're making various efforts to stop deforestation of the country. Now, going back to the issue of results-based payment, we have a fund that is being operated, and we also want to make sure that there is a fair distribution and allocation. In order to ensure that we have been making effort to strengthen the elements of various projects. And the fund is being used for making our traditional forest stronger and more robust. There are various factors that have to be considered. For example, we have to look at the community engagement, and there are various parameters that we're operating for forest management. And these parameters are being used to ensure an efficient and effective utilization of the fund. And I want to take an example of how the broad-based approach that we're taking for forest management and governance. Again, we understand the importance of efficient distribution and allocation of the compensation. That is why we're resorting to the Forest Act that was legislated before. And we have been able to halt deforestation to a certain extent. And we were able to also bolster productive forest management and also better meet social needs related to forest management. And also from the point of social production for the country as a whole, we're trying to explore various solutions that would be workable in collaboration with rural communities.
It's 4 a.m. in Argentina.
Wow.
Now we are moving from Argentina to Indonesia, and Indonesia is an heavyweight forestry country and has been in the forefront of many forest action and the international dialogue on forest. This year, Indonesia is also the president of the G20 and the co-chair of the FACT dialogue. We have here the ambassador of Indonesia to the Republic of Korea. And Bapak Sulistianto, can you tell us how Indonesia is realizing domestic and international action to reduce deforestation impact and related carbon emission?
Okay, thank you. Excellencies and distinguished guests, delegates, it brings me a great pleasure to be present at this high-level panel discussion to discuss this important issue. Turning to the question raised by the moderator, Mr. Nasi, allow me to respond by reading out the statement prepared by the Minister of Environment and Forestry of the Republic of Indonesia for this event. Ladies and gentlemen, excellencies and distinguished delegates, I thank you for the invitation to share our thoughts in this forum. As we all might be aware that in developing country with a high population density such as Indonesia, the need for land utilization has the potential to suppress the existence of forests, which lead to deforestation. The main challenge is how to manage natural resource and meet development needs while minimizing deforestation as low as possible and an effort to achieve sustainability. In this regard, while aiming to accelerate the country national emission reduction, Indonesia has initiated what we call forest and other land uses, or FOLU, Net Sink 2030. An approach and strategy where by 2030, the absorption level of FOLU sectors is already balanced or higher than the emission level. After 2030, Indonesian FOLU sector is targeted to be able to absorb GHG along with GHG emission reduction from energy transition or decarbonization, as well as exploration activities in other sectors, including the agricultural sectors, to achieve net zero emission by 2060 or sooner. The agenda for FOLU Net Sink 2030 already has the legal basis as regulated in the presidential decree in 2021, and in more detail has been stipulated last February by namely the ministerial decree on the operational plan for FOLU Net Sink 2030. Excellencies and distinguished delegates, Indonesia is of the view that to deal with deforestation, a concrete simultaneous and systematic effort from local to global levels, and from within and outside the forestry sectors, notably transforming agriculture and food systems, ensuring and promoting sustainable and legal supply chain is already paramount. On that note, within Indonesia G20 presidency, the environment and forestry sector had already held the first environment deputies meetings and climate sustainability working group meeting on March 2022, in which that, among others, there a priority agenda to promote sustainable and environmentally sound economic development by maximizing the co-benefit of the post-COVID-19 recovery program and the achievement of sustainable development goals. In Indonesia, this agenda has been realized through the implementation of social forestry, that is one of the activities within the Indonesian FOLU Net Sink 2030, and has become a national priority program. Social forestry is aimed to sustainable manage forests for local community, or we call in Indonesia adat or customary, community groups, welfare, including through agroforestry, where people obtain income generation from forest products, agricultural intercropping and plantations. Within more than 4 million hectares of social forestry license awarded so far, food is grown on about 300,000 of those hectares across the country's provinces. Excellencies and distinguished delegates, I would like to reaffirm that the continuously increased need for forest resources and cultivated land require a solution in forest management to reduce land conservation and trigger deforestation and realizing sustainable land use. Hence, along with the agenda of Indonesian Folu Net Sinks 2030, our commitment to implement social forestry for the sake of community welfare and to maintain the balance of nature, especially maintaining the country's biodiversity and forest cover, will be back-to-back working and strongly implemented. As the presidents of G20 for 2022, Indonesia encouraged the active role of various sectors simultaneously to form concrete action for the need of the present without compromising the needs of future generation, while maintaining the continuity of the supporting and carrying capacities of the environment for environmental and climate protection. I thank you.
Terima kasih, Sulianto.
Thank you.
Now, COP27 this year will be in Egypt, and we have the chance to have Dr. Abosena here. And Dr. Abosena, at the start of the panel, Karin talked about the Glasgow Declaration. Can you tell us how the COP26 that are pledged on forest can be put to scale or to the lead to the COP27? And how do you see the forest and climate agenda for Africa in terms of both mitigation and adaptation? And what could be done concretely to scale that up? All that in 6 minutes.
Okay.
Not the means.
And the last one, the most challenging issue for me. But first, thank you very much for inviting us for this important session. And also, I would like to extend also thanks to the Republic of Korea for hosting the Congress this year. Indeed, it's a very important question, and I would like to start as a roadmap from Glasgow to Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt. Egypt presidency of COP27 will build on what have been accomplished in Glasgow and capitalize on the momentum to ensure balanced progress across all negotiation tracks. That's what we would like to ensure. So, in fact, forests are one of the most important ecosystems for combating climate change. And as a result for this fact, the world leaders gathered in Glasgow have come to consensus on, have come to a consensus on what we can call a declaration for a Glasgow Leader Declaration on forests and land use. This is why, in order to conserve forests, avoid actions that lead to deforestation and land degradation, and enable sustainable management for our global forests. And also this will be achieved through increasing the access to investment and improve the effectiveness and accessibility of the resources. This is a very important issue and priority for us, have been taken as a task for us to COP27. In addition to this objective, it is very important to link this global objective to the access to the appropriate finance that would maintain our global forces, as we call it, the green lungs for our world. So the global forest finance pledges, as well as other forest-related pledges announced in Glasgow, to fund the protection, restoration, and sustainable management of forests can be scaled up by involving more partners from various fields, ensuring that such commitments are met and demonstrating to global community that progress has been made on the ground. Must be our focus during COP27, which are referred to as the COP of implementation. This is a very important slogan we have already agreed right now to be our slogan in the COP27 this year in Egypt. COP for implementation, together for implementation. Coming to the African countries, which are, Egypt was nominated by African countries to be the presidency for the COP27. So we are representing, by say, the African countries and even also the developing countries. So we are working on priority for initiating ecosystem initiatives to protect and restore and best management of the global forests. This is actually with a special focus on certain regions which are hardly affected by the climate change, like the African countries. So the African Great Green Wall, which intends to rehabilitate 100 million hectares of existing damaged land by 2030, this will capture around 250 million tons of carbon and create 10 million employment in rural regions, in an example of African success efforts. It provides a climate change barrier across the Sahel region, which was with plans to replicate in other parts of Africa. This would be a very important initiative, and success story could be replicated in other regions. So we'd like to have it as a success at the ground. So to improve action on the ground, global assistance and collaboration are required. It's a must. As an African country, Egypt, improving access to finance and enough finance and sustainable finance, and this is what we are always calling how we can do the balance between the finance for adaptation and finance for mitigation. It's a very crucial issue for the developing country, as most of the developing countries are affected countries by climate change. They are not affecting countries, but by the end we are all affected by climate change. So access for reasonable finance is a very crucial issue, and actually this is one of the top priorities for the COP27 related to the climate finance, sustainable climate finance, adaptations, and balance between adaptation and mitigations is also one of the priority. With this, I would like to also, we hope that to invite all of you to be with us this year in the COP27, as Egypt presidency is looking forward to host all the countries and come together with a consensus for implementation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So let's give a big round of applause to all our panelists. Second panel. So I can ask you to go back to the and last but not least, we will have the point of view of the host country, and we have the pleasure of having Dr. Yoon Park, the president of the National Institute of Forest Science of the Republic of Korea, that is going to tell us the Korea experience on restoration, RED Plus project, and its goal of cooperation on UN RED. Dr. Park.
Okay, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Hyun Park, the president of the National Institute of Forest Science. Okay, I'm so honored to participate in this significant and vital place to discuss the prevention of forest degradation. Because of lack of time, I'm gonna give you just a brief 3 opinions, 2 personal and 1 as the representative of Korean government. When I was working on issues related to REDD+ or did research on ODA, I realized that the forest and forest conservation are not the ones that really matter. We need to focus on people rather than forest itself. I would say that FAO is doing quite well at encouraging people to participate in actively by setting up a frame named the Forest and Landscape Restoration rather than just forest restoration. When I mention landscape, it means all components concerning on productivity, including human beings. The Republic of Korea is praised as a model country for its success in forest rehabilitation because we considered people along with planting trees as well. Ensuring the success of REDD+ or REDD, it is crucial to allow local people to agree on their activity and be actively involved. Instead of preserving the forest, a realistic compensation should be rewarded for better quality of life for the indigenous people. In connection, I would say that a proper method to help people's lives better should be provided. As of my understanding, the biggest reason that REDD+ is not progressively implemented, although you are saying that it is going well, they are locked in result-based payment frame. Current activities should be incentivized and encouraged rather than rewarded once project finishes. An adequate level of investment should be involved to attract indigenous people or countries can actively participate. In this sense, I would suggest Mr. Benjamin Singer from GCF or some other funding instruments. Why don't you add phase 4 for this kind of one? Not just for result-based payment, but why don't you give them some kind of funding for incentivizing the progressive active? Let me add one more thing as the representative of Korean government. In line with the global changes in the environment, the Republic of Korea plans to develop and provide the revised UN REDD+ educational curriculum and materials that reflect the new rules of the Paris Agreement, Glasgow Leaders Declaration on Forest and Land Use, and Global Forest Finance Pledge. The current UN REDD+ educational curriculum and materials were produced in 2016 and emphasized the preparation and implementation of REDD+. Now is the time to improve and supplement the curriculum in accordance with the global changes in the environment surrounding REDD+. The Republic of Korea is preparing to offer production support for a revised REDD+ educational curriculum and materials that focus on the implementation beyond the existing Warsaw framework for REDD+, which focus on just the preparation. The Republic of Korea is also planning to develop and operate a capacity building platform of REDD+ that actively utilize Korea's forest restoration experiences, multiple failures, and successful experience to overcome them. Furthermore, various supportive plans are underway, such as online education and hosting networking events utilizing webinars. the Republic of Korea is vigorously cooperating with the UN Red Plus program that has built fruitful knowledge and experience, and to support the capacity building platform of Red Plus from the international community since 2008. We clearly understand that forest is the source of life, and saving forests is the way to solve climate change, climate challenges, and save the earth. However, this should not only be done by the one country, but also be accompanied by global solidarity and cooperation. Primarily, it demands actively sharing the experience of failure and not repeating the same failure. The Republic of Korea will take the lead in such cooperation, and we look forward to your cooperation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Park. We are reaching the end of this session. A bit late, my apologies for the colleagues that come late, but I think that we have listened to very interesting points, and I hope that that has been a very good teaser for all of you to continue attending the events related to this sub-team. And more than that, be convinced that we can do something about forest, about reducing deforestation, halting forest loss, if we want to do it, if we put our priority right, and if we work collectively and help each other. So thank you very much. Thank you to all the panelists. Thank you to the people that were in the room. Thank you to the people online. And I wish you a very good World Forestry Congress.